Hey folks, today we're getting personal. So Paul and I have been through some stuff and we figured, why not talk about it? Because if you're watching this too, there's a good chance that you've been through some hard stuff. Yeah.
So welcome to Centered.Live. This is season 2, episode 6. And we are glad to have you along with us this evening as we talk about some of the challenges that both of us have fairly recently faced. We are the hosts of Centered.Live, which is the whole purpose of Centered.Live is to discuss how we can more effectively live our lives balanced with all the things that are happening around us and sometimes to us, and being able to figure out then how we can be more effective in what we do with intention. So intentional living. And your hosts are Randy Burgoyne and myself, Paul Maloy. And we're glad to have you with us.
So, all hard times aren't created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we want to outline here is some are done to you.
Right.
From somebody else, whether they're good or malintended. Some just happen, right? I mean,
yeah, true.
Nature, illness, and then there's those that are brought upon you, whether you had good intentions or bad.
Yeah.
Right. It's your fault in some cases, right?
Sometimes.
But before we get into this whole thing, as a historian, is any of this new? Is this kind of like a new societal thing that happens where people have these, major life tragedies?
Yeah, for sure. As long as there have been groups of people living together, there have certainly been events that have happened that required migration or a start over, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, as I have been sharing with my students, world civilization, we look at the cradles of civilizations, of which there are 6 known cradles of civilization. And it's interesting to consider, well, what put them in those locations? And then in many cases, what ultimately took them out of those locations? Those cradles sometimes were abandoned. And the answer is that, yeah, as long as there have been groups of humanity, there have been reasons and causes that have required people to start over again, to rethink where they are, what they're doing, and in some cases to innovate to be ultimately better off than where they were. So
Okay.
yeah, this is an age-old challenge.
So I'd like you to start out with your story in the last few years. Okay. Well, maybe back up to before you moved to Oshkosh.
Okay. So one thing, and if you've been with us before on this series, you know that we've shared backgrounds, and one of the things that certainly I have been characterized as is a dream chaser, which is absolutely true. In fact, at one point in a class, somebody asked me how many jobs I have had, as in like how many different bosses have I had, and it's over 40. And in some cases, that includes me staying in exactly the same place and having different bosses be assigned, to me. An example of that would be at the school that I was at before I went to Oshkosh. I was there through 6 different principals.
Yeah.
And that's not unusual. That's there is a churning that comes through education, public education, on a fairly regular basis. And it's interesting to note that every principal has their own personality, they have their own style, and I was able to get along with most. Some were more challenging than others, to be sure.
Well, I don't think that's unique in today's day and age to have
Right.
job changes. Maybe when
Yes.
it was our parents or the greatest generation, they had careers that would last a lifetime. They had a skill,
that was common.
a trade. Yeah, it was common that they would have a skill or a trade that would last them a lifetime. Right.
And certainly your father was maybe a little bit different because he was working for an industry and then started his own company, and then that changed. And so he went on to other things. And certainly you and I both have been in and out of multiple companies, but my dad actually probably changed jobs somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, at least a dozen to 24 times. I've never sat down to actually figure it out, but that was, again, kind of a combination of things that he wasn't satisfied. He thought he could do better and decided to move on. Or in some cases, he was basically invited to move on. But which, again, you and I have both experienced that.
Yeah. But I think in every case that I can think of, I think I'm growing personally.
Yeah.
I'm going to improve some aspect of my life. Maybe it's.
And certainly that's part of what we're going to be talking about tonight is how we look at the challenges as they are often thrust upon us. And it requires us to determine how we're going to react, or better yet, how we're going to act in light of the challenges that we're trying to deal with. So as Randy said, I was teaching history and speech and debate at a middle school, and I did that for 16 years. I actually did go 1 year to a sister school who invited me to come and teach with them. And interestingly enough, I was there only a matter of months when I realized that I was a significant mismatch. My style of teaching did not align with their philosophy of teaching. They said I was too funny. Like, there was no room. Literally, they said there's no room for comedy in the classroom. Now, I was not trying to be a stand-up comedian, but I will tell you this, my students enjoyed being with me. And when I realized that they had a different philosophy, I decided I needed to go back to the school where I had been welcome with the style of teaching, which does involve fun. Because I think every student should enjoy being in a classroom environment. And if the teacher can't create that, then it's going to be more challenging for the students. And that also means that it's going to be more challenging for them to learn. So moving forward more rapidly then, at the time that COVID came through and it changed the way that we were all teaching, I started thinking, okay, is it my turn now to look for something else? And sort of half-heartedly, I started exploring some other opportunities, and really and absolutely with zero exaggeration, my wife and I saw God open doors for us to give me an opportunity to work with youth at the Experimental Aircraft Association, headquartered in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And so we knew that this was something that we needed to do. It was a very prayerful decision, not a knee-jerk opportunity, but it meant that I was going to step away from being a classroom teacher to take on project management, which Randy knows full well. I did that before I became a teacher for about 18 years, is that I did project management for a variety of high-tech software companies. So I went to Oshkosh, moved my wife and I, we bought a home, we sold a home, bought a home. And we did a lot of work in the home. It was a 1986 home, and we remodeled extensively. So we were busy. The rewards were phenomenal. I absolutely loved what I was doing, which is, again, taking quality education and making it available to youth around the world to expose them, if you will, to the opportunities within aviation and aerospace. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. But we also knew that in going there, that it was not going to be a permanent change. We knew that it was a limited time because we both felt that we needed to come back to Utah at some point to be closer to our children and grandchildren. And some of them are out of the greater Salt Lake area. But we still needed to, we knew that we would need to come back. We just didn't know when that was going to happen. And in my timeline, in my time frame, I was shocked one day to come to work and find out that they were inviting me to go on a different path. That's a nice way of putting it, right?
That's right.
I thought I still had a couple of years left to finish the various projects that I was working on and wanted to finish. But there was a difference of opinion on strategy. And I had one idea and my boss had a different vision. And we had been talking multiple times about that discrepancy, but we couldn't seem to resolve any kind of a middle of the ground, right? And so they just decided, you know what, we're going to go a different direction. And so they said, we are going to lay you off. And immediately that meant that I'm thinking, okay, where do I go next? And we can talk more about what those next steps were and what the emotions were as all of this became a reality. So yeah, we definitely know those curveballs and those high-speed lane changes.
Yeah. So I like to think of it as there's a difference between getting knocked down by a storm, by a bully, or by your own choices.
Yeah.
So which was it for you?
I would have to honestly say that it was a combination of me trying to insist on a strategy and a vision that I had that I thought was necessary and workable versus the vision that my boss had. And so that conflict of opinion, we just never seemed to be able to create a compromise. Sometimes I would try to do what he specifically wanted me to do, and it set up conflicts in other areas. And it's like, no, that's not what I should be doing or what I need to be doing. So some of it was based on my choices, and some of it, again, I thought was, okay, maybe I just didn't articulate my vision well enough to create understanding with my boss.
Right. So I'm going to jump ahead and talk a little bit about some the feelings I had as I made the transition about 6 months ago. The company I was working for as a contractor,
right,
a fractional CIO type position, and about Thanksgiving time, all of a sudden it was just out of the blue, we're done funding. We're finished. It was a private company. It was privately funded. Your position is not going to get any more money.
Right.
And I'm thinking I can't work for free. I would love to. They're fun projects, but no, I gotta fight. And so I had, kind of an internal battle of people I enjoyed working with.
Right.
And leaving that environment and starting new. And I felt like I needed to start new completely. Now, call it inspiration, call it guidance by the Spirit. That's the kind of thing that touched me, that I said, you know what, I need something new. I need to get out of this situation, make a clean cut. And that was hard for 3 months, December, January, By the way, job search in December,
It's hard, isn't it?
it's bad.
Yeah. It's like you don't even, yeah, absolutely.
And finally, yeah, actually, it was 4 months, I guess. In the middle of March, I got an offer with the company I'm with now. I started at the beginning of April, so I'm just like almost 4 weeks into it, and wonderful experience. But the stress and the anxiety to go through those 4 months of trying to establish a new career, especially at a little bit older age than I'm comfortable with in changing careers.
Yeah, that is a reality. And I will tell you that I had several friends who tried to do career changes in their late 50s to mid 60s, and they came back and they warned me, and they said ageism is a reality. And in fact, as I was working my resume, there were several resume coaches who consistently said the same thing. You need to eliminate hints at how old you are. Like, don't say that you've been in this industry for 18 years, just say 10 plus years. Don't say that you've been teaching for 16 years, say it's 10 plus years. Don't give that indication that mathematically they can say, oh my gosh, this is an old geezer. We don't want to hire him because he's only got a year or two left in him before he would retire, which again, retirement age has been continually pushed out, right? I don't feel like I'm ready to give up. I don't feel like I'm ready to retire, and I shouldn't characterize retirement as giving up, but I don't think that I'm ready to hang up my hat and not be actively participating somehow in a teaching environment. But man, it's tricky. And I am convinced, and you probably had the same experience. I'm convinced that when it came down between me and one other person, and they chose that other person, it's because somehow they were saying, okay, here's a person that's just coming out of college, or this is a person who's had a few years of experience as opposed to, my 30 years of experience. And they said, he'll be with us longer, or she'll be with us longer. Right. And that's an advantage. And it is, honestly, it is an advantage. But at the same time, I think then that it completely overlooks the rich depth of experience that you and I both have.
Right. And I think that's what my current employer appreciates, is that richness of experience. In addition, there's some technology that I'm working with that's 40 years old. So
interesting.
So an old guy is kind of a good fit. No, but so my next segment, I wanted to talk about some of the things we hit on before. But I want to break it out into 5 different lanes of hardship. Okay. One is this one's really hard to handle, and it's someone else's bad intentions, deliberate, targeted. Okay. That is hard. I've been a victim of that. And it just breaks your heart to think that someone that you trusted takes advantage of you that way. Second is someone else's misguided intentions. Now, they may be good to begin with, or they're just not paying attention, but it's still that other person's fault that you have that situation, that challenge in your life.
Yeah. And to be honest, sometimes they think they're right.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, they miss something.
Right. And so I guess the point is you've got someone else has caused your pain.
Yeah.
The first 2 are, someone else. First one is deliberate. The other one is misguided intentions, let's say, right? The third one's the one in the middle. Nobody to blame. Okay. you got illness, you got accident, you got a market collapse, you have an earthquake, tornado, cancer, whatever it is. Nobody's to blame
Right.
for that hardship. All right. Fourth is self-caused, trying to do something good, some right intentions. Very painful outcome when you are trying hard
Right.
to do what's right, to be successful, and you fail.
Right.
Now, the fifth one, I think, is a rare case. At least I would hope it would be.
Yeah.
And this, right, is that I tried to be bad. I tried to inflict pain, right, on somebody else. I steal their car. I, sell them a bad product because I want, the money, just to make it money.
Well, and another way to put that is that, so every year, shocking as it is, every year there are teachers who get fired because of inappropriate relationships with their students. And it's not like they are necessarily trying to destroy education, but their choices are ultimately inappropriate. And so again, that is their fault, that they made those choices, and they're being held accountable. So yeah, even if you were saying, well, they didn't deliberately try to harm their employer, if you're willfully making mistakes that are against the law, against the rules, against expectations, then again, you've kind of created that that repercussion or that consequence.
Yeah. So put on your historian hat again. Think of maybe historical figures or moments of history that where someone has done one of these 5 things. Now, here's the one thing I just kind of noticed just as we were talking. 2 and 5 kind of related. So someone else's misguided intentions, and 5 is maybe our own misguided intentions that are causing others harm. Right? It's a circle of life.
Yeah, there's obviously some interwoven connections there. Yeah. So again, looking at history, it wouldn't be hard to point out where you have leaders who have risen to the top of their governments and in some cases then changed the direction. We think of somebody like Julius Caesar, for example, who was actually originally in a triumvirate, which means that there were 3 leaders, and Julius Caesar decided to kill one of them in battle, or have him killed in battle. And then the other one was kind of out a ways, and he just simply assumed dictatorship, emperor for life. Okay. And then because of his direction, which was alarming to the Senate, ultimately there was a plot that was successful in his assassination, even though he was doing some things that we would say, at least from the standpoint of looking at the impact of the Roman Empire, would have continued to bolster or strengthen the Roman Empire. So again, he was doing some things that he had started out one path and gradually came to a different place. And then there were some repercussions, some consequences, right? And we see that throughout American history. I've just finished a book that included a fairly lengthy section about Aaron Burr, who is the guy that's most famously responsible for killing Alexander Hamilton in a duel. He seems to have been a little bit unhinged throughout most of his political career, but it really went off the deep end. And as a vice president, he was arrested and put on trial for treason because he had created a plot to kill Thomas Jefferson and take over the White House. Again, it's like we forget that he had done some. He had been an instrumental leader in our early days of our democracy. And what we remember, of course, is his bad decisions. I also would like to just more recently than those stories, one of my heroes, if you will, is a man that you'll probably recognize the name of, but younger people may not, and that is Lee Iacocca.
Mm-hmm.
So Lee Iacocca became, I would say, globally famous as the chairman for Chrysler Corporation. And he stepped in at a time when Chrysler was on the rocks. They were a distant third in terms of American car makers, and globally they were dismal, down in the 20s, I think. And he took over, but it wasn't let me put it to you this way. Lee Iacocca was working for Ford Motor Company, and he is the one that was the brainchild, if you will, to the Ford Mustang, which is an insanely successful vehicle, right?
Right.
Magnificent vehicle. And I know that you could argue, well, they had some bad years and some good years. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
The point is that it was a very successful moneymaker for Ford Motor Corporation. And yet Henry Ford II and he batted heads. They had a discrepancy of strategies, and Henry Ford II fired him. And then, interestingly enough, Chrysler Corporation then invited him to become the CEO of Chrysler, which he accepted. And there was a span of about 3 months in between those two jobs, those two different employers. And then what he did for Chrysler has become legendary. Mm-hmm. And they're still number 3 in terms of the U.S. automakers, but what they did during the time frame of his leadership was a total turnaround that is still admired in our time. And so again, you know, when you look at these different categories of the things that happen to us, again, you know, it's like, okay, so in Lee Iacocca, was it his decision to leave? No. Was it, though, in part due to his refusal to back down to Henry Ford II? Yes. And I would say that in my circumstance with EAA, it was absolutely this idea that I'm trying to do something good, but it didn't somehow line up with a larger vision. And so, you know, self-caused, but trying to do good, right? I was definitely trying to help the organization.
Well, and that's a hard situation too, where even coming in as a new employee, I'm trying to establish myself as an expert in my field,
right?
And a value to the company.
Yes.
And also figure out the culture of the company.
Yes.
I've always felt like I'm a chameleon. I can fit in, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can shapeshift. And I think I do fit into this company. But it's hard to know. It's hard to know until you've been there several years, right?
Yeah, or at the very least several months.
Right. And I look back at our 5 lanes of hardship,
mm-hmm.
right? I've been in 4 of those.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. I don't necessarily think that I've intentionally caused harm.
Right.
Now, somebody may argue that, but I have not. I honestly have not. So how would you characterize your experiences? Have they been in 3 or 4? Yeah, I bet at least 3. Right?
Yeah, at the very least, right? And again, you know, having gone through somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 different bosses over my professional career, and I should, you know what? I remember my first job was after I'd graduated from 8th grade. And my 8th grade history teacher actually invited me to come and work at her husband's office. And so I was just mailroom help, literally mailroom help. And that was just for the summer. But if I look at, okay, that was when I was, 13? So since 13 to now, which now spans 40 years. Yeah, to have said that I've had 40 different bosses that would raise some eyebrows. It would be like, what's wrong with him? How come he can't stay in a job? Well, I have actually stayed in some jobs for multiple years, but to begin with, when I got into high tech, the whole world of high tech, and Randy is well aware of this, is that if you want to move up, you have to move out. And that is so common that if you stay with one company, you languish. And then people start to wonder, well, what are you really worth? If you can't find a job somewhere else to move up, then you must not be worth very much. And so it was constantly job hopping, and I was with Novell for 4 years. But there were others, startups, that I was with for less than a year. And some of them were bought by bigger companies, and that necessitated a change for me. And some some of them failed. I was with 2 different startups that actually went under. They didn't succeed. So yeah, I've definitely been in multiple lane changes. And again, I would like to think that I've not ever done anything specifically to hurt anybody or any company. So, but when we think about all of that, I think that there is that I'm not even sure that I know how to say this right, but number one, at some point, we have to be careful how we position our experience, our rich experience. And we're going to have to talk about this a little bit later, Randy. We're going to have to talk about what the experience brings of being required to look for another job, right? In other words, you're being invited to move on, which is a nice way of saying you're getting fired or laid off or something like that, right?
Right.
But I think then that there's a whole mental impact. There's a spiritual impact, I think. And then there's also, how do you approach the plan of action? How do you create a plan of action to move forward with what comes next? And I know that we're going to talk about those things, but again, it's kind of like when people ask us, well, what happened? Do we talk bad about this scenario that we've just come from, or do we honestly share, or do we keep that close to the vest and close to the heart, or do we figure out a way to spin it, as people in marketing would say? Do we turn it into, well, I needed to move on? And it's kind of funny because people would say, well, what happened? And I'd say, well, God opened the doors to take my wife and I to Oshkosh, and we knew it was temporary. We just didn't know when. And so when he closed the doors, we knew that it was time for us to do something else. Yeah. That may sound trite. That may sound like, oh, you're just saying that, that's a nice way of saying that, you got fired, you got canned. Right?
You got canned. Yeah.
So there's obviously a lot to what other people say, think, do when we share some of that information. And I think, again, it requires some care, it requires some thought. So I'll let you kind of jump and guide how we're going to move from here.
Yeah, that's a nice transition to my next segment, is don't burn bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they deserve it. Okay. There's been times when I I think back at the times I've left a company, whether I was invited to leave or I left on my own free will. And some were kind of a mutual decision, right?
Right.
I think of one young, early in my career that I was invited to leave, and I stood up in the meeting and told them they were lousy, good for nothing business managers, had no idea what they were doing, and
Okay.
I'm very happy to leave. Thank you very much. And walked out. I don't know that I burnt bridges, but I certainly didn't mend any fences, right?
Right.
As I left there. So another time, I left the company because I was having, I guess, various challenges with working with new management that came in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that had come up in the company and had finally taken charge, and I didn't like it, so I left. Another time was company was getting ready to be sold. I didn't
Right.
know that. I get canned as a middle manager, but that one I was really upset. I told them I was, but I could have inflicted a lot of harm on that company as I left, because I had a lot of keys of knowledge that they didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And as I left, I handed them my brain dump, a manual that I'd been keeping for 4 years
Mm.
of my job. And they were just kind of dumbfounded, like, you wrote a manual? I said, you want to know what my job was? Here's everything right here.
Which, by the way, that practice is definitely encouraged throughout most management positions, is that you have that developed. So as you move up, theoretically, you hand that manual to the person who's coming in to replace you, and that's seen as a wise steward and a good manager. In your case, yeah, you could have taken that with you, and it would have taken the new person maybe months to figure everything out.
Well, here's the key. At that point in that company, that was about 20 years ago, there was an associate of that business. He didn't work for him, but he knew him well. Young entrepreneur, well, younger. He is now the CEO of the company I now work for.
Oh, how interesting. I don't think I realized that. So,
yeah, there's some little ties in here about how I made a good exit, left a good impression on a company, on an individual that ended up being the CEO of a fabulous, larger company now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he remembered that, said, oh, yeah, let's hire him.
Yeah. I think it's also fair to say, and perhaps through our experience, through our maturity, I hope, we're aware that people who exit companies badly are often remembered for that exit. And as a result, everything that they may have done good prior to that kind of gets washed away. And we see that with actors who cause problems on sets. We see that with CEOs. We see that with presidents, not just presidents of companies, but presidents of countries.
Yep.
You know, if they misbehave and cause problems for their successor, then oftentimes that sticks. That ends up being part of their legacy, and it's not a good part of their legacy. So, I will tell you that I worked for a startup. It was going well. It was really succeeding. And I helped the company to consolidate about 30 contractors down to less than 6. And in the process of doing that, not only was that going to save a significant amount of money for the company, but it was going to streamline all the different services that they needed. And the funny thing is that on Valentine's Day of that year, I was invited. This is after we had done all of the consolidations, had signed all of the new contracts, and they brought me into vice president's office and said, we don't need you anymore. And that was a shock because I thought I was going to manage those contracts, manage those relationships. And so that was sudden, surprising, and not a little devastating. But I didn't feel like I needed or wanted to, raise any kind of a problem with that. It's like, okay, well, it's somebody's choice. I've done what I could. I did my best.
You didn't feel like you could argue or discuss or negotiate back.
Right. My job. Why, at that point, it's like, why would I want to keep working there? So a few years later, I'm in with another startup, and again, they're doing well. And what happened there is there was just simply a misunderstanding and a misalignment of I was trying to consolidate contracts again, save the company money. Turned out that the startup company I was with had no desire to save money. They were trying to expand relationships. I didn't know that. And so when they invited me to leave, I said, thank you, because I felt like I was a square peg in a round hole. Right. It was a mismatch. And I knew that. And in point of fact, it was leaving that company where I called my wife on a cell phone, the old Motorola brick. And I said, I think this is my cue to change careers. And she said, well, what do you think you want to do? And I said, I think I'm being directed into a teaching career from here on. And that's when I made the change from high-tech management to go into or to become a teacher.
Yeah.
Now, let me just tell you real quick. My experience then with EAA was such a fabulous experience. It was a dream job. It was an amazing experience in every way that you could possibly imagine something being awesome. I mean, I got to be with airplanes, in airplanes, fly airplanes. For me, it was just like, it couldn't get any better, right? Plus, I'm still working with or on behalf of kids, youth all over the world. It caught me by surprise when they said, we're going to go a different direction. And those are the exact words, we're going to go a different direction. And I said, thank you for giving me the opportunity to at least do as much as I did. I have loved it. It will always be one of my most cherished experiences and memories. I shook the hands of my boss, who was there, and the director of HR, who was there, and even gave my boss a hug. And I said, I really, really appreciate the opportunity that I've had to be part of this organization. And the EAA is a phenomenal organization. Doesn't mean, though, that everybody in the organization has come to it by a lot of professional training, although my boss did have a lot of professional management training. Sometimes it's just differences of opinion, differences of personality. But again, I don't want to burn that bridge. I want to make sure that when I'm talking with people, here it is. There it is. That I share that the EAA is a fabulous organization, and I am still actively participating with our local chapter, even in some of their leadership, very much involved.
Well, there's there's ways to be angry
Yes.
and sad and
Yes.
mad and
Yes.
still be professional.
Okay, and let's talk for a minute about all of those emotions. I will tell you that while I was cordial, polite, kind, respectful,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that there weren't days following where I just completely lost all emotional control, and sometimes asked God, why? But I already knew the answer. Which was I'm needed somewhere else. And then it was kind of incumbent upon me to figure out where that other place would be with guidance, because certainly this became a common part of my everyday prayers. It's like, okay, where do I look next? Where do I go? And I tried. That's something else that we need to talk about. It's like, okay, so what do you do when you now have to look for that other job, that other opportunity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the key is to save the real conversation for the appropriate person.
Yeah. And that appropriate person could be a religious leader. It could be a counselor, could be your spouse, could be your family. I certainly reached out to my siblings. I reached out to my children, who are all adults, sharing with them my concerns, my thoughts, my feelings.
And that's important. That's an important process.
Right. Yeah. In fact, let's, if you're okay, let me just go ahead and jump into this next section, which is about what do you do next, right? So 70 to 80% of jobs are never publicly posted, which is a phenomenal statistic to think of, because we know that especially in a growth market, there can be thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of jobs out there. Now, of course, that doesn't mean they all fit an individual. And yet still, to understand that the vast majority of jobs are actually not posted is really remarkable. And they get filled through referrals and connections. That, this is just part of what everybody does when a position is being created or it needs to be filled. They're going to go to the people who are closest to that position and say, do you know of somebody? Is there, somebody within your group that would fit here? And a lot of times the answer is, yeah, I actually do know a friend that works in a different industry, but he would be good here. Or I know somebody that is looking and it'd be perfect here, right? So we definitely see that. 54% of workers landed their job through a personal connection. Right. So in your job searches, Randy, have you ever had that kind of connection that worked through that process, as opposed to you just answering? And it used to be, of course, in our youth, Randy, want ads in the newspaper.
Right. So in each career, I've thought about this. In fact, a few months ago, I was considering this. Every single job I have had has been through a connection, a personal connection, a network person that knows somebody that refers me. Okay, so at first it was family, and then it was family again. And then it was a neighbor that got me a job at a company, and then another neighbor for my fourth career. And then I did answer an ad for it was more of an entrepreneur opportunity that I regret getting involved with, but that wasn't a job offer. That was more of that's another story. But anyway,
it was a learning opportunity, Randy.
It was a learning opportunity. I learned a lot, and I met some really fabulous people. But, and this last position was a personal connection.
Yeah.
I've yet been able to apply for a job and get an offer or even an interview. Every single interview I've had has been through a personal connection, whether I got the job or not.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
it is key to do your
yeah.
network. And it's
Yeah.
hard, it's embarrassing, but I just spammed my entire contact list. Hey, I am available. I'm looking for full-time or contract work. And I sent a follow-up email about a month later. I didn't get enough traction. So I waited till after New Year's and sent it out
Mm-hmm.
again.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who saw it? It was the CEO of my current company. So it's okay to spam. It's
Yeah.
okay to ask for help.
I would say the vast majority of the jobs that I've had, and maybe I shouldn't say vast majority, I would say about half of the jobs that I've had were through connections, including when I had the opportunity to work for Burgoyne Computers. That was you.
Yeah,
You
correct.
invited me to come and work for your family company. Yeah. And that opened up doors that I would never have had any other way. So when I went to work from BCI, when I went to work for WordPerfect, it was because of a relationship that I built as our WordPerfect representative would frequently stop at the store. And then from there, as you open up more and more people that you know within the industry, you can tap them and say, okay, if you hear something, let me know. But at the same time, a lot of my jobs came through me pounding the pavement, metaphorically, trying to find leads and then follow up on those leads, but still being able to link back to the previous job and say, I have somebody who will vouch for me. And that is so important. So again, you may initially be upset that you've been cut, but if you don't burn those bridges, if you treat that situation as a learning opportunity, but also if you treat it with gratitude, which sounds antithetical to being put into that hard place. But if you do that, then you can say, all right, there's somebody at my previous company that will basically say, oh, Paul was an awesome person. And, why the company let him go or why he stepped away, I don't understand, but he's fabulous. You've got to have him. And I do understand that in today's world that recommendations are very different than what they used to be, but still, it's something that can be a huge benefit when you have somebody that's in essence backing you up, that's in your corner and saying, that this person is well worth considering, interviewing, hiring, and you won't regret it, right? I mean, that is super, super valuable. So even when it was me finding my own leads, still being able to reach back to those personal connections was important.
Yeah, and the important thing is to use your network in a professional way, saying, hey,
Right.
You know what?
Yes. Respect your network.
Respect your network. I jokingly say that I spammed my network. Well,
yeah,
it was an announcement letter. It's like, you know what? I've lost my job. I'm out of work. I need some income. I'm poor, so please, alms for the poor. No, it was professional. It was short. My little email that I sent out was maybe 2 sentences, 3 sentences. So your network is not your last resort. It's your first call.
Right. Yeah. And it's so funny because now let's talk about the emotional hit. And it will often feel like you've been hit. Thinking about being in a boxing ring and taking a full hit to the face or to the abdomen, it feels like
Sucker
that.
punch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a psychological danger that almost always follows when a change has been thrust upon you. And it can be, I have no idea what to do next. Maybe I'm not worth what I thought I was. Maybe I don't have the skills that I thought I had. Maybe I'm not worth anything. There's a whole bunch of these things that slam down on us. And like I said, in all honesty, after my sudden change from EAA, it was, there were days when I literally could not confront a computer screen. I just kind of slept through the day because somehow I needed to recharge. I needed to take some,
and that's okay.
Yeah, it is. It is okay. You can't stay there.
Right.
Because that would be an indication of bigger problems. If you find that your depression has gone from just being sad to, something far deeper and far more menacing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that part of you have to allow for those emotions. And, we talk about the cycle of grief. And we often apply that cycle of grief to when we lose a loved one. And we know that cycle of grief, which includes anger, includes sadness, includes I'm going to be okay. So some hope, right? All of that. But it repeats, and it doesn't have to go in that circle. It can ping around, hitting different aspects at different times. And it may get lodged in one for more than one day. And then it finally unlodges and it pings to something else. The point, I guess, really being is that you still should create some kind of a plan, because ultimately at this point, finding a new job is your full-time job.
Yep.
And even having said that, understand that you still have to have some self-reflection time, some self-downtime, some self-care time. So that might mean reading a book. It might mean going to someplace you've always wanted to go and didn't have the time to go. Ann and I did that. We would take weekend exploration trips as a way to still feel like, we had normal lives, I guess, in a sense. And Ann was working, so that helped. We weren't completely destitute, but we definitely took a financial hit. But the other thing that should always, when appropriate, when applicable, don't hesitate to file for unemployment, which I did.
Right.
But I know in your particular case, Randy, that didn't fit because of your contract scenario. So if I were to say, looking back, what kind of advice would I give myself, having newly found myself in that position, was be patient. And, you can't say to somebody, don't stress it, because of course they're going to stress it, right? You and I both know the stress that we went through, the enormous heartache that we went through. And again, all of those questions, am I worth anything? Should I keep looking, or am I done for? Right. Especially at our age, which we're young bucks. We're still,
That's
we
right.
still have a lot to offer.
It's a state of mind, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, you do need to have a plan, and you do need to work that plan. Now, I went to employment fairs knowing that there wasn't going to be anything there that I could actually lean on or look at for a lead, because all of those employment fairs were for something other than education. But I still went because it was doing something that moved me forward. It was like, okay, it's getting out of the house. It's part of interacting with people, talking with people. And this is where, again, talking with your network can be so valuable. I had made so many industry friends, and I immediately reached out. I said, I am changing. Are you aware of any leads? What I got back was so much positivity, so much, you are amazing.
Yes.
And I needed that. I
Yep.
needed that self, that affirmation of my skills
And
and
you
what.
wouldn't have got that feedback if you hadn't been
Yep.
honest in
Yep.
sharing your situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in summary, I guess in this thing, you've got a job, and that job is to find a job.
Yeah.
And part of that is to schedule your activity, whether it's downtime or exercise.
Right.
Or,
Absolutely. And I actually had a schedule that it was a loose schedule. It would say 1 hour doing this, 2 hours doing this, 4 hours doing this, 2 hours doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you had a system, you
Yes.
had a schedule, and a lot of Dr. Pepper.
My favorite drink. Yes.
I know that, right?
Yes, you do. Yeah. Yeah. But, again, it's fun to also look historically, and we can certainly see people who setback after setback after setback didn't let that setback define who they were, at least not consistently. It may have, been a setback that was devastating at the moment. I think of, for example, Apollo 1, when it exploded, killing 3 astronauts. The entire NASA population was so devastated by that. But what it did is it made them more committed to understanding what happened in the accident and how to fix the problems, and to be more mindful, more careful, more committed to getting all things right. And certainly the safety of the crew was paramount, right? I think of well, there's always the ever-present attribute to Thomas Edison, who somehow said, of varying numbers, I didn't learn 1,000 ways to fail in creating the light bulb. I found 999 ways that didn't work and one way that did work. Whatever the number actually is up for debate. But the point again is that he tried and tried and tried and tried and tried, and he just had failure after failure after failure. But he knew somewhere there was something that would actually light up, and so he just didn't quit. And that's the other thing, is you can't quit on yourself. You have to know that somewhere, somehow, especially if you involve a faith in things way beyond yourself. And so I definitely invited God to be part of my job search. And in doing so, I could feel that comfort. I could feel, in some cases, very clear direction. No, don't look in this direction. You need to look in this direction.
Mm-hmm. And I do remember a specific moment when I was quizzing emailing my network. I thought, I wonder if I have so-and-so's email address. Do a little search, found he and his wife, send it to both of them.
Oh, interesting.
So that's kind of a little cue. And then I get a text message from his wife, his ex-wife, that says,
"Oh,
hey, I put a bug in his ear. Hopefully he'll get an interview."
Interesting.
So
very interesting.
Thank you, Tammy. She knows who she is. I count her as a dear friend, and she was also my parents' neighbor at one point. So very kind, gracious woman. So anyway, okay, let's jump ahead. When you came back to Utah and you walk into that classroom for the first time in Tooele County,
right,
school district,
different school system, different level of teaching. I'd only done junior high previously, and so it was radically different.
Yeah. So what caught you off guard? I know you had different
Mhm.
environment, different
Right.
school, different way of teaching, different class of students, really.
Yes, yes, very much so. In fact, now I am working with at-risk students who have basically failed out of their traditional schooling environments, and so they are coming to our school for a level of hands-on help that they couldn't get in a regular public school environment. So we are an alternative high school, and our goal is to give them everything that they need to be able to graduate. And so that's the underlying premise. But what I was kind of shocked to see is how many students still didn't seem to care about their education. And it's funny because the same students that don't typically care about their education are the ones that think that as soon as they are done with school, whether that means dropping out or graduating, that as soon as they can get a job, that everything will be fine. And
Mhm.
I don't think they understand yet how important having a well-rounded education prepares them for real life. And instead, they want to short circuit the education arena and just jump ahead and get into a job, get some money that that they're earning, and they think everything from there will be fine.
Mhm.
Of course, it's an overly simplistic outlook, and I think that in many cases, what they will learn through a series of hard knocks is that they could have better utilized the time in school to be better prepared for the things that they're going to face. That was the first thing, is that how many of them didn't seem to care. The
Mhm.
second thing that really impacted me hard is the level of profanity that was just so common, so rampant. Everything between students has profane words, and they can't say a sentence without including some kind of a cuss word or a swear word. And it and I find it not just disheartening because it's unprofessional, but I also find it that it's like needle jabs at my own spirituality, if you will. And I have signs in my classroom that say, we only allow professional speech in this environment. But it's become so commonplace and so accepted in our society. And I am absolutely 100% certain that especially the kids that that use it so routinely and matter of factly, it's because that's what they hear in their home. Um,
Yeah.
and there's nothing I can do about that other than try to remind them that that there's places where that language is inappropriate, and my classroom is definitely one of those places that shouldn't contain those kinds of words. So it's been hard, but at the same time, feeling like I was guided there, and God deliberately put that location for me and opened the doors that were necessary, which actually, I don't know if I ever told you, Randy, but I was number 2 as a choice originally. And then the number 1 choice ended up taking a different job. And so they came back to me and they said, "Are you still interested?" And I said, "Yes."
Mhm.
And then seeing that as God's affirmation that this is where he needed me, um, I have made connections with many students, and I feel like I'm making a difference. Now, does that mean that nobody else could have made that difference? I doubt it. But does it mean that I'm in the right place at the right time for some of them? I think so.
Right, right. So here's a question for you. Do you feel like the students are there? Do they feel like they're forced to be there, or are they there of their own will?
I would say the majority of them feel like they are forced to be there, and some of
Mhm.
them truly are. They're there
Yeah.
by law.
Oh, okay.
Um, there are some that feel like this was their parents' decision, and then there are some that are absolute. They have told me I couldn't have succeeded like this anywhere else, and those are the ones that usually are grateful for the opportunity that they've had to come to a different kind of school where they get more individualized attention and smaller class sizes, to be sure. They feel less judged for who they are and for the struggles that they face.
Maybe in seeing other students with similar concerns.
Yes.
Or
and challenges, similar challenges.
Or teachers that are at least are interested in them a little bit more than just advancing the class.
Yeah. And I think that some, certainly not all, but some feel there's a difference in my classroom, and it's the fact that I actually do care. I care about every single one of them, whether they want that care or not. I care about their success, whether they, are thinking about that themselves or not. That care is there, and I think some of them may inwardly, as in like unconsciously, they're responding to that.
So I want to hit on my next segment real quickly. We're getting past our hour time.
I know this is our longest episodes. Maybe people are already snoozing and saying, "Okay, I'll pick up the rest." We certainly hope that there's been something here that has been of value to our listeners.
Yeah, and I want to touch on one thing, and then I'll let you pick up the closing segment here, and that is take care of yourself.
Yeah.
When you're out of work, some of the easiest thing to do is kind of be lazy and kick back. But I would spend 3 days a week at the gym. I would volunteer at a local nonprofit. I would eat like a normal human being. In fact, I kicked off a diet. I ended up losing 15 pounds over those 4 months. And it became kind of a hobby to eat right and help manage stress.
Wonderful.
So physical activity is key to keeping your brain working. So,
yeah. And I think as part of that, because you're 100% right, Randy, I think part of that is that the more that we can approach this with excitement, which displaces fear and worry, stress, right? The more that we can think of everything about the experience in a positive way, like what can I learn from this? How can I be better? How can I reinvent me to be a better person, of more value, right? And then, of course, the whole concept of resilience that can't be overstressed. That it's so critical that we continue to work with our families and work with our friends. And certainly you and I, we both know how much you were involved in terms of being part of my support group, just as hopefully I was part of your support group. Mm-hmm. And knowing that in a sense, at least a little bit, we had each other's back, right? And certainly I sent you job opportunities. I sent you some things to check into. And so these, more than anything else, I think it's so vital that we continue the sociality that is so fundamentally important to our sanity and to our well-being. And certainly, again, all of that will help to lower our stress. It's not that we're not going to be stressed, but if we can manage it and we can not let it get out of control, right? Because that will then create a downward spiral that will definitely hurt us. And in some cases, potentially never recover from. And we don't want to go there.
Well, yeah, I don't think there's any value in just disappearing out of society
or being a martyr,
or
in this particular environment, this particular case, us falling on a sword and saying, I should not have been fired, or, they don't know what they missed, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah. There's no benefit.
Anything.
Nope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Thank you, Paul. This has been a great discussion, and we could probably go on for another hour and tell wonderful stories.
And our listeners are probably saying, please don't.
But here's the thing is, I think that either we have had an experience that we can share this episode with, or our listeners know of somebody that's going through it right now.
Right.
Maybe this can be a help to them and steering them a little better direction to make their life a little better, a little more centered,
A little more balanced.
A little more balanced. Yep.
Right.
So,
and therefore more joyful, right? I mean, that's really what we hope. More joyful. So
be sure to share and like and subscribe and help us grow our message here at Connect. Sorry. At Centered.Live. We're connecting live.
There we go.
Centered.Live. And that's our website, Centered.Live. So thanks, folks.